Relic is known for making great RTS games, but Company of Heroes released back in 2006 was their last great new game. Nothing they've made since has matched it. Now, before all of you Dawn of War 2 fans come with me with a pitchfork, I mean a new game that's not a sequel to an established RTS game. And I think Company of Heroes is actually the most cinematic RTS game ever made. There's no competition. Relic was obviously heavily inspired by the stuff that came before Company of Heroes, in particular movies like Saving Private Ryan or The Thin Red Line and the HBO series Band of Brothers. Company of Heroes, I would say, came at the end of a long trend of World War II focused media. We had movies, books, and of course video games. We just couldn't get enough of World War II. You would think people would get World War II fatigue by the time Company of Heroes was released, but it still worked. And I would say that's because we have not seen World War II from the RTS perspective, at least from a big AAA RTS perspective. We've seen World War II from shooters like Call of Duty, but controlling an army, controlling a company, that's a fresh new perspective. The very first mission is a great demonstration of the cinematic qualities of Company of Heroes. The Normandy landings, Omaha Beach in particular, in Company of Heroes, has been done in movies brilliantly, and also in Call of Duty. It's not really anything new as a setting to open a video game, but as I said, putting you, the player, as the commander of this beach landing amongst the massacre of troops, that's new. Certainly, the game gave you this illusion that you need to be careful as you approach the beachhead. But obviously, it was all smoke and mirrors, despite the machine guns and artillery. It's not going to decimate your troops. This was a fancy looking tutorialization that got you straight into the action. I like that the game introduced you to the role of your infantry, the regulars, the sniper, and the engineer just by playing out this sequence. Scripted, of course, but effective nevertheless. Immediately, you are immersed in this gripping cinematic war while learning about these RTS units in a subtle way. At the end of Mission 1, there's some very interesting cinematography. They chose not to show the violence from the perspective of the Allied troops. Instead, we see boots running, muzzle flashes, the reaction of the soldiers' faces as the bullet casings fall to the ground. And it's not that Company of Heroes chooses not to show the Allies killing the Nazis, like in the Quarantine mission, we see a soldier gunning down retreating enemies. But it's different. This is not gratuitous video game violence. Company of Heroes uses these cinematic shots, sometimes with restraint, to also tell a story about the horrors of war and how it affected these soldiers.
Ceasefire! Lewis! I said ceasefire, goddammit! Just wasting ammo.
One thing I realized though is that Company of Heroes is less about the individual soldiers, unlike the movies that inspired it, which of course the movies focus on the soldiers telling a more personal story set in this massively big moment in history. Company of Heroes, on the other hand, the characters are present throughout the campaign, but you never quite get to know them as actual personalities. You get bits and pieces here, but it's not really about the stories about individual soldiers. They are part of Able Company, which the whole game is focused on.
Hey, hey! Huh?
I'm gonna assume that's grape juice, Sergeant.
Absolutely, sir. Grape juice. Well, it was grape juice. About a year ago.
There are recurring characters, but for the most part, the designers aim to tell you about the war story of this company going up against tough situations. You most likely won't remember their names, but you will vividly remember their actions, their victories, and their sacrifice. That was the objective, I'm pretty sure, of the design of Company of Heroes. Part of the reason how this 20-year-old game could look this cinematic was also the new game engine Relic developed. The first Essence engine was a massive leap from their previous game. I mean, just look at how they went from Dawn of War to this gritty, grey, depressing, but more realistic take on the battlefield. It's like they pushed the technology 10 years ahead from what the industry was familiar with in the RTS genre. Beyond the more realistic shaders, lightings, and shadows, I think the two biggest aspects of the engine are one, the physics, which has been a staple for the Company of Heroes series to this day. The most impressive parts are like when a building gets blown up and infantry can take cover in the buildings dynamically, taking pot shots from new openings. This was pretty damn impressive and really pushed the brutal war movie narrative the game was going for. You saw the carnage of how the war could totally level a town. The most important point about the Essence engine, to my argument here, is the improvements made to the details of the individual unit models. You could actually see the facial expression of these soldiers. Relic showcased this heavily in their close up cinematic shots. They actually made in engine cutscenes in an RTS not look so stilted and cartoony, which, even if you looked at a classic like Warcraft 3, was still just RTS units going about with very limited animation and expression. No, Company of Heroes was absolute cinema. Incredibly high production quality and effort went into directing the cinematic cutscenes. A monumental technological shift in RTS with a brand new engine that, quite frankly, RTS games weren't exactly pushing the boundaries before this. It's not just the visuals, though, that pushed this cinematic quality. Company of Heroes also uses one of the most impressive soundscapes in an RTS game ever. This is what makes those visuals, those cinematic shots all work. You didn't just see the explosion, you felt it. Sound added to the realism of the World War II battles. In fact, it was so good you could identify units moving about or firing from the fog of war just from their sound. You could tell a Stug from a Panzer IV, or when a German Pak 40 fires from a distance, you knew it was time to move your armor back just a tad bit. Oh, and Relic added one of the most horrific sounds in an RTS. The alarm of the Warfare. You first come across them in the mission Saint Framond, where you need to hold out against Nazi forces in this town square. But then you heard the alarms blaring and you knew it was time to get the hell out of the firing zone of the Warfare. And I thought it was brilliant that before the bullets were even fired, there is almost a stillness in sound. There is a deadening silence before all hell breaks loose. In this eerie silence, you heard your men chatting away. There was a tension that was only broken by that first engagement. The calm before the storm is just as significant in sound design as the big key battle moments where tanks are firing and artillery shells are landing. For me, despite amazing timeless classics like StarCraft and StarCraft 2 or Command and Conquer or even Total Annihilation, to me, Company of Heroes is my favorite single player RTS experience, period. It was not just good old RTS mission design here, it was an experience captured perfectly by a developer that showed reverence to the people that fought this war, to the reference material.
What's the matter, Franks? Never seen a dead body before?
I think what Relic did here was a once in a generation sort of feat of great design. Even the opposing front's expansion was brilliant. I just don't think they have ever captured this brilliance again. Dawn of War 2 was good, but was it Company of Heroes good? Company of Heroes was truly that lightning in a bottle moment for Relic. I expected Relic to actually do something about Company of Heroes this year, as it is its 20th anniversary, and indeed, they announced Company of Heroes Definitive Edition. I think it's great Relic is remastering their classics. Considering they've had a tough time with their recent RTS titles, you can't argue against a good remaster of a classic, so I'll be getting it when it comes out later this year. Anyway, do tell me what's your favorite memory of Company of Heroes? What's that one thing that you remember vividly to this day? And also, what's your favorite Company of Heroes? Maybe one of the sequels, maybe even an expansion. Tell me in the comments. Thanks for watching. Until next time, farewell, friends.